Welcome to Management 2110's Chapter 8 lecture, based on the readings from the textbook Management, 14th edition by Robbins Couter. Let's get started. We're going to start off with our learning objectives. First, we're going to define the nature and purposes of planning. Next, we're going to classify the types of goals organizations may have and the plans they use. And then we're going to compare and contrast approaches to goal setting and planning, know how to set goals personally, and create a useful, functional to-do list. Then we're going to develop your skill at helping your employees set goals. We're going to discuss contemporary issues in planning. But first, we're going to have to cover what planning is. Okay, planning is defining the organization's goals, establishing strategies for achieving those goals, and developing plans to integrate and coordinate work activities. So we're going to say that again. Planning involves defining the organization's goals, establishing strategies for achieving those goals, and developing plans to integrate and coordinate work activities. It's concerned with both ends, the what, and means, the how. So when we use the term planning, we mean formal planning. In formal planning, specific goals covering a specific time period are defined. These goals are written and shared with organizational members to reduce ambiguity and create a common understanding about what needs to be done. Finally, specific plans exist for achieving these goals. So why should managers plan? We can give you at least 4 reasons. First, planning provides direction to managers and non-managers alike. When employees know what their organization or work unit is trying to accomplish and what they must contribute to reach goals, they can coordinate their activities, cooperate with each other, and do what it takes to accomplish those goals. Next, planning reduces uncertainty by forcing managers to look ahead, anticipate change, consider the impact of change, and develop appropriate responses. Although planning won't eliminate uncertainty, managers plan so that they can respond effectively. In addition, planning minimizes waste and redundancy. When work activities are coordinated around plans, inefficiencies become obvious and it can be corrected or eliminated. Finally, planning establishes the goals or standards when used in controlling. When managers plan, they develop goals and plans. When they control, they see whether the plans have been carried out and the goals have been met. Numerous studies have shown generally positive relationships between planning and performance. Formal planning is associated with positive financial results, higher profits, higher return on assets, and so forth. Doing a good job of planning and implementing those plans plays a bigger part in a high performance than how much planning is done. In those studies where formal planning didn't lead to higher performance, the external environment often was culprit. When external forces, think government regulations or powerful labor unions, constrain managers' options, it reduces the impact planning has on an organization's performance. Finally, the planning performance relationship seems to be influenced by the planning time frame. It seems at least 4 years of formal planning is required before it begins to affect performance. Goals, otherwise known sometimes as objectives, are desired outcomes or targets. They guide management decisions and form the criterion against which work results are measured. That's why they're often described as the essential elements of planning. You have to know the desired target or outcome before you can establish plans for reaching it. Plans are documents that outline how goals are going to be met. I'll say that again for you note takers. Plans are documents that outline how goals are going to be met. They usually include resource allocations, schedules, and other necessary actions to accomplish the goals. As managers plan, they develop both goals and plans. Remember, as managers plan, they develop both goals and plans. We can classify most companies' goals as either strategic or financial. Financial goals are related to the financial performance of the organization, while strategic goals are related to all other areas of the organization's performance. For instance, McDonald's states that its financial targets are 3 to 5% average annual sales and revenue growth, 6 to 7% average annual operating income growth, and returns on invested capital in high teens. Here's an example of a strategic goal from Bloomberg LP. We want the world's most influential news organization. So the goal is more of a vision and not necessarily financial in nature. Stated goals are official statements of what an organization says and what it wants its stakeholders to believe its goals are. However, stated goals, which can be found in an organization's charter, annual report, public relations announcements, or in public statements made by managers, are often conflicting and influenced by what various stakeholders think organizations should do. The most popular ways to describe organizational plans are breadth, time frame, specificity, and the frequency of use. Okay? I'm going to say that again. The most popular ways to describe organizational plans are breadth, time frame, specificity, and frequency of use. Okay, so when it comes down to breadth, that's strategic versus operational, time frame, short term versus long term, specificity. I don't know why I can't say that word right now. Directional versus specific, and frequency of use, single versus standing. Strategic plans are plans that apply to the entire organization and establish the organization's overall goals. Plans that encompass a particular operational area of the organization are called operational plans. Sometimes you'll hear them called O plans or A plans. These two types of plans differ because strategic plans are broad while operational plans are narrow. We define long-term plans as those with a time frame beyond 3 years. Short-term plans cover 1 year or less. Any time period in between would be an intermediate plan. Although these time classifications are fairly common, an organization can use any planning time frame it wants. Specific plans are clearly defined and leave no room for interpretation. A specific plan states its objectives in a way that eliminates ambiguity and problems with misunderstanding. Directional plans are flexible plans that set out general guidelines. They provide focus but don't lock managers into specific goals or courses of action. Some plans that managers develop are ongoing while others are used only once. A single-use plan is a one-time plan specifically designed to meet the needs of a unique situation. In contrast, standing plans are ongoing plans that provide guidance for activities performed repeatedly. Standing plans include policies, rules, and procedures. As Exhibit 8-1 shows, these types of plans aren't independent. That is, strategic plans are usually long-term, directional, and single-use, whereas operational plans are usually short-term, specific, and standing. In traditional goal setting, goals are set by top managers, flow down through the organization, and become sub-goals for each organizational area. This traditional perspective assumes that top managers know what's best because they see the big picture, and the goals passed down to each succeeding level guide individual employees as they work to achieve those assigned goals. When the hierarchy of the organization goals is clearly defined, it forms an integrated network of goals or a means-end chain. Higher level goals, or ends, as they're also known, are linked to lower level goals which serve as the means for their accomplishment. In other words, the goals achieved at lower levels become the means to reach the goals ends at the next level, and the accomplishment of goals at that level becomes the means to achieve the goals on the next level and on up through the different organizational levels. That's how traditional goal setting is supposed to work. A problem with traditional goal setting is that when top managers define the organization's goals in broad terms, such as achieving sufficient profits or increasing market leadership, these ambiguous goals have to be made more specific as they flow down through the organization. Managers at each level define the goals and apply their own interpretations and biases as they make them more specific for their level. However, what often happens is that clarity is lost as the goals make their way down from the top of the organization to lower levels. Exhibit 8-2 illustrates what can happen. So what we have here is kind of a hierarchical layout of an organization in relation to the objectives that are being generated. So you have your top management's objective, and that is, we need to improve the company's performance. Then it goes down to the next tier, the division manager's objective, and that is, I want to see a significant improvement in this division's profits. And then it goes down to the next level of the hierarchical chain, and that is the department manager's objective, and that is to increase profits regardless of that means. So they're not encompassing the whole vision. They're more or less looking at their particular division. And the individual employee's objective says, don't worry about quality, just work fast. So you can see how the overall vision, when it comes down to the goals and objectives, how it gets diluted from top to bottom. A problem with traditional goal setting is that when top managers define the organization's goals in broad terms, such as achieving sufficient profits or increase in market leadership, these ambiguous goals have to be made more specific as they flow down through the organization. So instead of using traditional goal setting, many organizations use management by objectives. And that's a process of setting mutually agreed upon goals and using those goals to evaluate employee performance. Management by objective programs have 4 elements, being goal specificity, participative decision making, an explicit time period, and performance feedback. So instead of using goals to make sure employees are doing what they're supposed to do, management by objectives uses goals to motivate them as well. The appeal is that it focuses on employees working to accomplish goals they've had a hand in setting. So here, Exhibit 8-3 lists the steps in a typical management by objective program. So step 1, you have the organization's overall objectives and strategies are formulated. Step 2, major objectives are allocated among divisional and departmental units. Step 3, unit managers collaboratively set specific objectives for their units with their managers. Step 4, specific objectives are collaboratively set with all department members. And then step 5, action plans defining how objectives are to be achieved are specified and agreed upon by managers and employees. And then step 6, the action plans are implemented. Step 7, progress toward objectives is periodically reviewed and feedback is provided. And finally, step 8, successful achievement of objectives is reinforced by performance-based rewards. So, managers should follow 5 steps when setting goals. First, review the organization's mission or purpose. A mission is a broad statement of an organization's purpose that provides an overall guide to what organizational members think is important. Managers should review the mission before writing goals because goals should reflect that mission. Second, evaluate available resources. You don't want to set goals that are impossible to achieve given your available resources. Even though goals should be challenging, they should be realistic. After all, if the resources you have to work with won't allow you to achieve a goal, no matter how hard you try or how much effort is exerted, you shouldn't set that goal. It's got to be achievable. Third, determine the goals individually or with input from others. The goals reflect desired outcomes and should be congruent with the organizational mission and goals in other organizational areas. These goals should be measurable, specific, and include a time frame for accomplishment. A lot of people, when it comes down to goals and objectives, they like to use the SMART acronym, and that is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And then fourth, write down the goals and communicate them to all who need to know. Writing down and communicating goals forces people to think them through. The written goals also becomes visible evidence of the importance of working towards something. Fifth, review results and whether goals are being met. If goals aren't being met, change them as needed. Once the goals have been established, written down, and communicated, a manager is ready to develop plans for pursuing the goals. Managers should be able to write well-written goals. What makes them a well-written goal? Exhibit 8-4 lists the characteristics. A well-written goal is written in terms of outcomes rather than actions. It is measurable and quantifiable. It is clear as to a time frame. It is challenging yet attainable. It is written down and is communicated to all necessary organizational members. 3 contingency factors affect the choice of plans: organizational level, degree of environmental uncertainty, and length of future commitments. Exhibit 8-5 shows the relationship between a manager's level in the organization and a type of planning done. For the most part, lower level managers do operational planning while upper level managers do strategic planning. The second contingency factor is environmental uncertainty. When uncertainty is high, plans should be specific but flexible. Managers must be prepared to change or amend plans as they are implemented. At times, they may even have to abandon the plans. In a traditional approach, planning is done entirely by top-level managers who are often assisted by a formal planning department, a group of planning specialists whose sole responsibility it is to help write the various organizational plans. Under this approach, plans developed by top-level managers flow down through the organizational levels, much like the traditional approach to goal setting. As they flow down through the organization, the plans are tailored to the particular needs at each level. Although this approach makes managerial planning through a systematic and it's coordinated, all too often the focus is on developing the plan. A thick binder or binders full of meaningless information that's stuck on a shelf and never used by anyone for guiding or coordinating work efforts. In an uncertain environment, managers should develop plans that are specific but flexible. Although this may seem contradictory, it's not. To be useful, plans are needed. They need to be specific, but the plans should not be set in stone. Managers need to recognize that planning is an ongoing process. The plans serve as a roadmap although the destination may change due to dynamic market conditions, they should be ready to change directions if the environmental conditions warrant. A manager's analysis of the external environment may be improved by environmental scanning, which involves screening information to detect emerging trends. One of the fastest growing forms of environmental scanning is competitor intelligence, that is gathering information about competitors that allows managers to anticipate competitors' actions rather than merely reacting to them. It seeks basic information about the competitors. Who are they? What are they doing? How will what they are doing affect us? So in review of our first learning objective, planning involves defining the organization's goals, establishing an overall strategy for achieving those goals, and developing plans for organizational work activities. The four purposes of planning include providing direction, reducing uncertainty, minimizing waste and redundancy, and establishing the goals or standards used in control. Studies of the planning-performance relationship have concluded that formal planning is associated with positive financial performance. For the most part, it's more important to do a good job of planning and implementing the plans than doing more extensive planning. The external environment is usually the reason why companies that don't achieve high levels of performance, and the planning-performance relationship seems to be influenced by the planning time frame. So moving on to the second learning objective, we're going to review that goals are desired outcomes. Plans are documents that outline how goals are going to be met, and goals might be strategic or financial, and they might be stated or real. Strategic plans apply to the entire organization, while operating plans encompass a particular functional area. In continuation with our second learning objective, long-term plans are those with a time frame beyond 3 years. Short-term plans cover 1 year or less, and specific plans are clearly defined and leave no room for interpretation. Directional plans are flexible and set out general guidelines. In conclusion of our second learning objective, a single-use plan is a one-time plan designed to meet the needs of a unique situation. Standing plans are ongoing plans that provide guidance for activities performed repeatedly. And moving on to the third learning objective. In traditional goal setting, goals are set at the top of the organization and then become sub-goals for each organization area. Management by objective is a process of setting mutually agreed upon goals and using those goals to evaluate employee performance. Now, continuing on with the third learning objective, well-written goals have 6 characteristics. 1, they are written in terms of outcomes. 2, they are measurable and quantifiable. 3, they are clear as to time frame. 4, they are challenging but attainable. 5, they are written down. And 6, they are communicated to all organizational members who need to know them. And moving on in our third learning objective, goal setting involves these steps. Review the organization's mission. Evaluate available resources. Next, you're going to determine the goals individually or with input from others. Then you're going to write down the goals and communicate them to all who need to know. And then you're going to review results and change goals as needed. In wrapping up our third learning objective, the 2 main approaches to planning include the traditional approach, which has plans developed by top managers that flow down through the other organizational levels, and which may use a formal planning department. And then the other approach is to involve more organizational members in the planning process. On to our fourth and final learning objective. One contemporary planning issue is planning in a dynamic environment, which usually means developing plans that are specific but flexible. Also, it's important to continue planning even when the environment is highly uncertain. Finally, because there's little time in a dynamic environment for goals and plans to flow down from the top, lower organizational levels should be allowed to set goals and develop plans. Another contemporary planning issue involves using environmental scanning to help do a better analysis of the external environment. One form of environmental scanning, competitive intelligence, can be especially helpful in finding out what competitors are doing. Thank you for your participation in the Chapter 8 lecture. Stay tuned for the Chapter 9 lecture. Until then, check Blackboard for the week's activities and assignments.